Mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check. Hey, hey. You hear me out there, guys?
Este edificio se movió horrible, horrible. Tronó horrible. Que se salgan, la pared se rompió. Que se salgan. Que se salgan, se va a caer. Se va a caer. Dios mío, Dios mío, Dios mío, Dios mío. Dios mío, Dios mío, Dios mío, Dios mío.
La gente.
Dios mío. Ay, no, Dios mío, Dios mío. Ay, Dios mío.
Ari.
Dios mío.
¿Estás bien, Fer?
Mic check. Mic check. Hey, 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 hey. Can you guys hear me out there? You got me out there? Hey, 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 hey. All right, all right.
We want to get started because everyone's going to. Okay. Yeah, wait the first 5 minutes. No. The audio is going to come. You want me to get going then? All right.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? All right. All right, thank you, everyone. So this is going to be a little bit of a mix. You're going to hear me a little bit through the speakers, maybe if you're here in person, but the audio visual is mostly for the benefit of the folks that are participating online, since most of the folks, as you know, are online. My name is Kim Bowman. I'm special counsel with Neighborhood Legal, and it's my privilege to be your guide, your host for the tabletop exercise. And so I'll ask our AV folks to please go to the slides, please. All right, while they're working on the slides, let's see. What can I do here? Who likes lawyer jokes? All right, I cannot juggle. Let's see here. So if you're ever, I'm the wrong kind of doctor for a lot of things, juris doctor. If you're ever on an airplane and they say, ding, is there a juris doctor on this flight? You should panic because the plane is going down and the pilot wants a will. All right. I'm ready for slides whenever you guys are. They're really ready for slides whenever you all are. The camera looks great, though. Yeah. I cannot. Oh, hey, I got some slides. Yeah, you're all saved. All right. So a little bit of background. I was on the disaster team with Neighborhood Legal. I was actually pro bono before I came on to the staff. And now I'm mostly doing the Estates and Probates project. But the reason that I'm speaking with you today is because in my other work in the military, I've participated in a number of simulations, exercises, tabletop or otherwise. And, ooh, echo. I think they're still working on the audio stuff back there. So this is my opportunity to try and lead you through that. And we're going to start with a, oh boy, that's real weird, isn't it? We're going to, oh dear me, this is not quite. Okay, we're going to start by going over the rules. This is the exercise setup portion. So this is designed to be a realistic scenario. If you were just listening to Dr. Jones, you've had a moment to refresh yourself, maybe change pants if you needed to. It's scary business, right? But this is supposed to be like a roller coaster, scary but fun. We should be using it as an opportunity to practice our skill sets. It is something that will not have all of the details. I'm not going to say, and then this happened and that happened, and you say, but I work at this particular legal aid agency. We don't have all the details. I'm going to ask you to use reasonable inferences, working with the people sitting either at your table or, for those of you joining us online, you're going to be moved into a breakout room when the time comes. So we're going to hear, there's an echo I'm trying to avoid. He got me, Evan's got me. All right. We're going to be working in teams. If you are online, you'll be moved to a breakout room, or you can move yourself to the breakout room based on the number that you've been designated for your group. We ask you to work together, make reasonable inferences. Hopefully you're not just sitting with your 5 friends, people you already know. The goal is to mix you up with people you don't normally work with, different organizations, different skills. It shouldn't be a team of attorneys from the same firm. You should be swapped out. There should be a little bit of everything in each of the groups. That's the goal. Remember that teamwork makes the dream work. The only thing you have to do as a group as you get started, besides introducing yourselves to each other if you haven't met, take a minute, get to know each other for a second, right? Digest the exercise. But then pick one person to be your recorder, to take notes about what your group is talking about, because you're going to be provided with prompts at each of the key points. Those are the things you should be discussing and working through. All right. All right, you figured it out? All right. So this is the, let's see if, let me give this clicker a second to catch up. Last time I clicked it twice, it went like 4 ahead, so I'm being careful. No, this computer's on the other side of it, but. Okay, okay, here we go. All right, so as any case that we're dealing with an exercise, we want to be careful not to confuse people. Someone hears what you're talking about and thinks something's going on. If we're broadcasting to the internet, people hear things. So let's be very clear. Exercise, 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 exercise. This is an exercise. Begin exercise. And clicker, come on now. Come on now, clicker. Work with me. This is bad news. It's almost a disaster. Yeah. Well, not ill-fated, right? Okay, next slide. I'll just tell them to do it. They can do it on the back side. Okay. We're about a month in the future. It's July 20. That's 2 slides. Back a couple, please. Back a couple, please. Keep headed the other direction. Yeah. I'll tell you. We'll do it. There you go. Wednesday. That's it. Nope, you missed it. We were there for 1 second. There you go. Wednesday, July 20th. It's 83 degrees. It's light wind, so that's actually better than normal. It's slightly cooler than a normal July day in LA. But we are in the 3rd year of drought. And then go forward 1 slide, please.
Cuernavaca, muy cabrón. La carretera se cuarteó.
You could go to Grainger.com to find what you need to get the job.
Right. So for the purposes of this exercise, we're going to imagine that we've had severe to violent intensity across most of the county. And so buildings have collapsed, liquefaction in those high-risk areas, chimneys and walls have fallen. Even newer structures have shifted, they're off plumb, and as we heard, some single-family structures are totally fine, but some large buildings downtown have fallen. Power, water, gas, sewer, they're all disrupted. There's broken pipes. As we know, they cross the fault. There's damage across roads, there's fire. And as we learned, cellular lines, if you're trying to make a phone call, that's not very effective. Texting is more effective. But even then, with power cut, many of the cellular towers that we would utilize, they run out of power after a few hours. They only have backups for so long. Slide, please. Okay, so think to yourself, it's 3:15 on a given Wednesday. Where are you on a random Wednesday? Work, driving somewhere, right? Where would you be? Where would your family be? How would you contact them? How would you get to them? And what about your friends, your colleagues, your neighbors? How many miles would you have to walk home right now? Do you have those good shoes in your trunk with your bag, with water and food so you could get however many miles it is home from here we are here in Malibu? When you get home, where would you go if your house wasn't safe to occupy, but you can't leave? The roads are broken. There's 10 million people. We can't all leave at once. What would you do? And you remember that you're not alone because you have your community, but what would you do? So take a second and think about that scenario. Right, I'm thinking about my 20-month-old daughter in daycare back home. How do I get to her from here when the roads don't work and I got to walk it? I can't call. How do I get to her? How do I get us home? I hope my home's still there. I hope it's safe. All right, slide forward, please. Okay, so for the first 3 days in a real emergency, we're not going to ask legal services to be your focus. We're going to say all those things you were thinking about, that's your priority. It's getting home, it's taking care of your family, it's making sure everyone's safe. That's priority one. But for the purposes of our scenario, we fast forward 1 week. It's July 27th. So FEMA declaration, local teams have been working to do accountability to make sure people aren't buried under things anymore. But the estimates are coming in. As many as 2,000 dead in the quake. Thousands more have died in fires that resulted after. Remember, it's the third year of drought. Power is partially restored because the systems have been hardened in many places, but water, gas, sewer, largely still not online after a week. The 101, the 5 are completely closed because of major damage. All right, go forward a slide, please. As you can imagine, a major disaster. DRCs are in the process of coming online. Most legal services and government buildings, including courts, are closed. You can't go to the building because they need to be inspected. There's a moratorium in place for eviction, and there's economic relief they're working on. It's on the way. But it's 1 week later. So, what needs to be done and who needs to do it to meet your community's legal needs? And here's some of the things to think about. What are the first steps? What are your priorities? What are your clients' needs? What procedural plans and processes do you need to do as an organization? Be you government, private practice, an LSC, whatever your particular hat that you wear is. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our groups now. You're going to go to your breakouts and you're going to start thinking about these questions. I'll let you know when it's time to come back together and we'll share a little bit. Go. All right, we're going to come back together. So each group had someone taking notes, and we originally had planned on highlighting a couple of the online groups and getting some report back from them. I'm being told that the audio, it's not going to work basically. If they try and, we could spotlight them, but we wouldn't be able to hear them, so that doesn't do us a ton of good. What I'm going to do instead, though, is I'm going to ask if one of the groups has a recorder that wants to give us a couple of their notes for the benefit of the group. And this is the part where you can volunteer or be voluntold. Please. Okay, so we're going to call on Group A, Alpha.
All right, we were a little bit all over the place, but we kind of first looked at number one is our staff okay? So doing a call tree exercise to make sure that everybody's kind of present and accounted for, emphasizing on, can you all hear me back there?
It's on. Yeah, it's on. You want to stand up, project?
Sure.
Yes.
Just screaming at you.
Yeah, scream it at him. That's okay.
I'll start screaming, then they're going to jack up the volume on it. So we thought about doing a call tree exercise to make sure that the staff was okay. And we also talked about how our teams, that information as to their phone number, email address, make sure we have that not on just our computer. I think, Tila, is there a magnet with people's contact information? We talked about that in our group. So number one, just making sure that our team was okay and figuring out if they had needs, because they're also going through the disaster as well. And is there ways in which that just work community can kind of help each other? If they have children, they may have daycare issues. So, if you got 10 people who need daycare, see if y'all can work together and watch each other's children while other people can go out and try to do the services that need to be done. We just also talked about some preparatory steps before this even happened, and just kind of made an assumption that there was efforts in preparedness and training resources, and that each individual office maybe had these go kits in which some of the flyers for some of the most common legal problems, you had those printed out, several copies, because if they're in the middle of a disaster, you might not have power, so although you may have the documents, you might not be able to print them out. Talked about the importance of maybe laminating that, so you can kind of pass them around at a recovery center. And then just real quick, rapid fire, some of the issues that we kind of thought would be prevalent would be housing. This happened July 20th. It's a week later. It's the end of the month. The rent's going to due. What types of legal needs are going to be with the rent that's going to be coming due? Food, DSNAP, jobs, unemployment, and healthcare.
Yeah, and who are you, by the
way? Oh, I'm Andrew Van Singel. I'm with the ABA Standing Committee on Disaster Response and Preparedness.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. So the kind of canned answer that we start with it tracks a lot like that, because he's from the ABA's disaster. I mean, you heard him, right? That is the canned answer. Number one, check on your people and implement whatever emergency policies and procedures you have, because you have those, right? Right? Right. You're here. We assume you've been thinking about these things. And for folks at home, online, whatever organization you're in, we assume you have a disaster plan in place and a call tree, some means a text tree, right? If you have everyone's VPN number, right? My office at my desk, you can't call that and get me because the phone lines are down. You have to text my personal cell phone if you want to know if I'm okay. You've got everyone's personal cell phone in a tree, right? Right. Okay. But if you're not in the geographic area, how do you help? If you happen to be in Tahiti when the earthquake happens, I'm going to assume you're not coming home from Tahiti for the earthquake right away. That's going to be a difficult thing to do, right? Airports are down, those kinds of things. But can you still help, so long as you brought your laptop like I do? Because my wife will tell you I don't know how to not bring a work laptop with me when I go on vacation, right? You probably can help remotely. Our friends who are online in Texas, and where was the other one? Skip, where was the really faraway place? We have someone in Micronesia right now. Okay, the person in Micronesia can help because there's a means of providing remote services so long as the infrastructure is sufficiently up. We talk about what are the categories of need that we think we're going to deal with. There are those emergency legal issues, right? TROs and domestic abuse related issues. Those don't stop. If anything, in an emergency, those are going to go up. That's what we know empirically. So what are the ways of providing emergency legal care, and not just from the perspective of advocates, but the courts? Do the courts have a mechanism in place for a judge to be available to sign TROs the day after an earthquake? That's something that needs to be built into our governmental system. Healthcare, property and insurance claims, probate, trust, and unfortunately, death-related law, because, as we know, people will die. UD, bankruptcy, contracts, fraud. These are the kinds of things that a week to a couple of months in are going to start to really matter. All right, slide forward, please. It's 2 months later. It's now September 20th. Power is restored. Communications are broadly up, so you can call and text people. Water is estimated to take up to 6 months to restore in Southern California. That's a real estimate. Not every neighborhood. Some will have it quick, but it could take 6 months for everyone to have it back. Sewers are in the worst condition of every major infrastructure piece that we have. And think about it. When they buried the water line, what did they bury it next to? The sewer line. So when the sewer line broke, what's in your water? Right? So yeah, these are problems. So we do have the government agencies functioning, though maybe not in the same facility. The courthouse is operating out of a community center because the courthouse fell down, right? That kind of a thing. Debris is being removed, but think about it. It's hard to get a good contractor when there isn't a pandemic or a major emergency going on. It's been harder when everyone during the pandemic decided, I'm going to remodel my house. What's it like when 10 million people are impacted by structural issues that require the kinds of materials and expertise to do rebuilding? Right, we have an existing supply line problem. What's it like when we need a lot of drywall at once for an entire county of 10 million people? So you can imagine these are the kinds of things that as any random person you pull up, renter, homeowner, or otherwise, these are the things they're dealing with. Habitability questions. Slide forward, please. What needs to be done? 2 months in. So we're past that first week. We're a couple of months into this. We've restored some of the basics, but you can see that we're starting to hit the recovery phase where this is where there are some pinches. What legal needs exist? What do you need to do? You've got another breakout opportunity here, so please go to your breakouts if you're online. And let's take another about 15 minutes to discuss what do we do from 2 months on. Go. minute left. All right, so as before, we'll ask if someone is willing to volunteer their answers. Do we have one of the recorders who will weigh in on the 2-month report out? Anybody? Again, it's tough because I can't call on the online folks. How about F? Who wants? You're the recorder.
I'm William Simonsick, legal technology attorney in LSLA. 2 months out, so at this point, DRC should be set up. We should have been triaging that. At this point, we're assessing what issues we have in terms of clients on staff, who needs further assistance, so FEMA appeals, issues with late aids, extensions for sort of FEMA deadlines, and we're triaging with staff who are on the front lines at the DRCs to continue that system. At this point, I believe INLA's starting to move back from a first responding role, if I'm not mistaken. So kind of following through and continuing to touch base with different resource providers to make sure people who still have unmet needs who could be met by, say, a Salvation Army or someone like that can get there.
Good, thank you. Slide forward, please. So in that between first week and the second month, you do have to think about what does it take to get a DRC set up, right? So we talk about phone trees, but even if you can get a hold of everyone, your whole volunteer list, where do you plug those folks in? Where do they make the most sense in the case of a broad disaster? So not a regional wildfire, we're in Malibu, it's not lost on us, but the entire county, millions and millions of people. We talked about, does it make sense to have pre-printed materials that are laminated? What about what we used to call Jag in a Box, where you've got CDs that you can roll around and then you can pull it out? But what do you do when there aren't printers because there's no power? Or how do you charge the laptop? So yeah, maybe laminated paperwork makes a lot of sense, especially in the initial response. But by 2 months, if there's still power, if we start to have these opportunities, can you put a lot of the useful information, checklists, materials onto CD and have those ready to go in a hard box that's not going to be damaged in the initial quake? Can you have redundant backups so that if one of the facilities that you utilize is lost to one of those fires, up to 20,000 fires is the estimate, right? If you lose your building, then where does all that material live? Does somebody have a backup somewhere? And then we talk about the differences in needs. So the needs don't change, right? What our clients need, very similar things from 1 week to 2 months, except more of the work is going to be in things like FEMA appeals, timelines, deadlines. But plugging people into the resources. So the ability to serve as a connective tissue to other organizations that are providing direct services. So the role does change to some degree, though the needs may be very similar in a category way of thinking about it. Slide forward, please. All right, it's 1 year later. We're commemorating what's being called 720 because it's after a year we have 6,000 people who would have died as a direct result or as the immediate effects of an earthquake. So you think about it. You saw Dr. Jones was talking about how 1,800 or 2,000 casualties from the earthquake wouldn't be unanticipated. Double that number in the fire. And then you've got all the folks who aren't getting the health care that they need. Someone who has a heart attack 3 days after an earthquake, their odds of being able to see emergency medical providers and receive the level of care that they need in order to survive, you can imagine that being impeded. So you can imagine, we no kidding could be losing thousands of people, not just in the earthquake, but then in the fires and then in the consequences of the infrastructure loss. One of the estimates is $200 billion including that lost economic opportunity that you heard Dr. Jones talking about. And we'll add a complicating factor. I know FEMA, if you're in Disaster 101 hearing about FEMA, what happens when there's multiple major disasters? And so for the purposes of our scenario, we had an earthquake in July, but in October there was a Category 4 hurricane, which shifts public attention away from Southern California because it's months after our event. But we're also talking about multiple pulls on the government apparatus at the federal level, right? Red Cross is now thinking about multiple disasters as well. Some of the partners that you discussed, they've got several different competing priorities, and they've happened fairly close in proximity. That's the scenario 1 year later. This is our last breakout group opportunity. Slide forward, please. And so while you're talking about, okay, we're a year out, also be thinking about, right? Not just what issues are you dealing with at 1 year, but what about beyond 1 year? How do we prepare ourselves, our communities, our clients, our organizations? In the very first update, we heard, well, how do we prepare for this? You were starting to think about preparation at the first breakout. This is an opportunity for everyone to have those conversations, including what kinds of, and here's Will, right? What kind of policies? Because Will's a policy guy. What kind of policy should we be working on in anticipation of a disaster of the kind we're describing today? So go ahead and take your last breakout opportunity. We'll reconvene in about 15 minutes. All right, in the interest of time, you've got 1 minute left. All right, we're going to come back together. So we started about a half hour late. We're going to do what we can to end early so we can move things forward. So the panel will be running a little bit late, but we're going to give some time back here. This is end X, so we're ending the exercise. Normally we would do a report out here as well, but for the purposes of time saving, you as your group had discussed some of these things. You do have someone who is hopefully taking notes. And so what we would ask is just if you did take notes that you're willing to share those with us on your way out when you head back in for the panel. You can leave those with us. Slide forward, please. And we'll move slides kind of quickly here. I don't know if they can hear me. So for the last few minutes, we're actually going to talk about a different element to this, which is one of the things Dr. Jones talks about is the trauma component. There's a psychological component. What we're going to talk about is a team, an individual and a team dynamic component, because it's not something often addressed in the context of disaster. Forward, please. Okay, so this is a geode. Again, I'm the wrong kind of doctor for this. I don't know what they are. I don't know how they get made. I failed that part. But here's what I know about a geode. On the outside, it looks like one thing. On the inside, it looks different. Every one of us is a little bit like a geode. If you've ever taken a personality test, one of those, you know, I'm an ESPN or whatever, right? That tells you the inside of your geode. What do you prefer? What do you like? What's your internal style? But here's the problem. When someone looks at me, do they know that I'm an ABCDQ? No. Right? How you behave in your social interaction, the outside of you, is not necessarily a reflection of how you feel on the inside. And when you ask people, those things often don't align. Forward, please. This is the idea that when you're communicating with someone, if you can do it at their level, at their frequency, you're more likely to be effective. Right? It's a concept known as versatility. Someone who's got their speed, their FM band, if you're talking FM to someone who's on AM, it does not work. So if we want to be effective in our communication strategies, we need to dial ourselves to the band of the person that we're talking to. Forward, please. Forward, please. So rather than using one of those other, Myers-Briggs, one of those things, I think those are really useful for you thinking about the inside of your geode. But the other thing I want you to think about is the outside. How do you communicate with folks? And so I'm going to recommend to you something you can look up yourself. It's called Social Style. It's a Tracon property. But you can take a test, and this is talking about how do you interact with other people. When you're in a team setting, how do you engage with folks? Are you more likely to ask, or are you going to tell? Are you more likely to be task or people-oriented? And so let me give you a couple of examples here. There's the driver. That's the upper right-hand corner. That's the person who, when you got together as your team, they said, all right, I'm in charge. The alpha type, right? So they've never met before maybe, and they show up and they say, all right, I've looked around for 30 seconds. Here's what we're all doing. Go, follow me. The driver. They tell, and they are mission-oriented. Let me contrast that with someone who's still very out-tell, but is more emotionally engaged. They're engaged with people. Think of someone who, like your Robin Williams, someone who's very funny, very engaging, outgoing, very personable, wants to tell jokes. You like this person. They are engaged with people, but maybe they're not always about the mission. Contrast that with the folks on the left side. They're more likely to ask. Your analytical person, that upper left quadrant. This is the person who doesn't say very much, but they are always thinking. They know the mistake you're making, but they're not always the one who tells you so. They sit around the table and they're doing the math, but they're not always sharing the math with you. All right? They see it, and if you're good, you can pull it out of them, but they may not tell you what they see. Or an amiable person. This is the person who, and there's 5 or 6 people sitting around a team table and everyone's giving input, this person doesn't say very much. And if you ask them, you know, Joan, Jane, Fred, we haven't heard very much from you, they're going to say these are all great ideas because they don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. But the person who isn't saying the most sometimes knows the most. And they get overrun by the person on the opposite end of the spectrum. An amiable person is likely to be bowled over by a driver. Right? Someone who is very analytical, they are about the data, is likely to be emotionally overwhelmed by your Robin Williams character, the expressive person, and vice versa. These are different types of team personalities, and in the wrong combination, or if we're not paying attention, we can really misuse a team. Forward, please. And so what we've got here is a little explanation of what the different ones are. And you can probably read this and go, oh, that's me, right? The trick is, and I'm just saying, look around the team that you were working with. Even if you've never met these people before, you can probably figure out which one was which at your table. Who was the person that showed up and said, all right, I'm in charge, here we go. All right, the driver. Now, you're not just hard any one of these things. You could be halfway between them. Go take the test, see what it says. But one of the things I want you to be thinking about is in the case of a disaster, you are likely to be put into a setting where you are not just working with the people you normally work with, where it is high stress, and where you are likely to, and this is what we've learned, in the case of stress, if you've got a time clock ticking, you default to whatever your style is and you go hard. The person who's at type A goes real type A when there's an emergency. The person who's quiet becomes real quiet. And so you're in a DRC working with folks, and it's a stressful situation. What kind of team? Because every single one of us is a leader. Right? I don't care if you're the executive director, the CEO, whatever. Every single person that you are engaging with and working with is absolutely a leader. So how do you make the most of the team and make sure everyone is in a best position to lead? Forward, please. So I'm going to leave you with this in the group dynamic. That's all talking about individuals, right? Versatility is your ability to say, I'm a driver, but I'm working with someone who isn't. I'm going to dial myself down. I'm going to switch frequencies to make sure I'm dealing with someone on the level of communication they are at and most comfortable with so that we're getting the best out of this relationship, right? That's what versatility means. But I also want you to think about group dynamics. In the case that a new group comes together, just like you all did here in Malibu or on Zoom, one of our breakout rooms. You've never maybe met these people before, but as a new group comes together, it forms, and tensions will increase. At some point, there may be a struggle because you got 2 alphas in there. There's 2 drivers, and which one of them's in charge? They're gonna, right? Which one? They're gonna figure it out. There's a tension to that, but at some point, the social roles will norm, and people will figure out where do they fit in the social order and in this team. And then eventually, you get there, you perform. But I want you to be thinking about, in the case of disaster response, especially after that first week and for those first couple of months, we are not working in our normal situations, in our normal settings, even with our normal people or the normal set of resources. You're working off paper, that you're taking hand files from location to location as things move. So thinking in advance about what kind of team member am I? What is my ability to best bring out the leadership qualities of others? That's something I want you to be thinking about now, not when the disaster happens. This is a preparation tool that I'm asking you to start taking advantage of, thinking about, because the time to do it is not at 3:16 on July 20th when the disaster has already happened, right? All right, forward, please. So that's the end of the tabletop exercise. We're going to be transitioning back inside for the panel discussion. As I said, we're running about 15 minutes behind, so we're going to ask your indulgence as we get that set up, but please help us by transitioning inside. For those of you online, please transition to the appropriate Zoom link now. Thank you, everyone.